Brandon Young made his major league debut on Saturday, and he wasn't bad. But Sunday really was. I'll recap the Orioles series loss to the Reds coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, April 21st, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles series loss at home to the Cincinnati Reds this weekend. I'll recap the Friday night 8-3 loss. We'll talk about some big struggles from Cade Povich. We'll talk about the Saturday win with Brandon Young making his debut and at least looking solid at times, and Ramon Laureano playing hero with 2 home runs off the bench. And then finally, we will discuss whatever happened on Sunday. Charlie Morton was abysmal, and the Orioles lost 24-2 in the rubber match. It's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So the O's dropped 2 out of 3 this weekend at home against the Reds when it seemed like things were turning around. They won the final 2 against Cleveland during the week. They won their first series of the year. They won their first back-to-back games of the year. And then after a rough game Friday, they played really well to win on Saturday. And we came into this Sunday game and it was like, listen, if the O's can get an okay start out of Charlie Morton, win this game, all of a sudden they've won 4 out of 5, 2 series in a row. They're 1 game under 500. And I would have considered the Orioles season back on track had they just won on Sunday. Now, they lost, which is going to happen, but they didn't just lose. They lost 24-2. So we will certainly get to what the world happened with that one. But we're going to go in chronological order. So we start with Friday. The opener of this series, the O's had their first 2-game winning streak of the year. They were trying to turn it into a 3-game winning streak. Unfortunately, they could not do that, falling 8-3 to the Reds on Friday. And I'm going to start with what went right from Friday's victory. And that was the O's did continue to hit some home runs. As the Orioles, at least the week before against Toronto and Cleveland, had started playing better baseball on this homestand, it was because the ball started to leave the park. It just wasn't happening after the first 3 games in Toronto for like a 10-game stretch when the Orioles were really playing bad baseball. And Cedric Mullins was able to stay hot. He had a solo homer in the second on Friday to put the Orioles up 1-0. That came off of left-handed starter Andrew Abbott for the Reds. That gave Mullins already his second home run against a left-handed pitcher this year. Mullins had only 1 of those lefty-lefty homers in all of 2024, and just 3 of them total in 2023. He's got 2 in April this year. Remember, he was terrible against lefties last year. We came into this season saying, look, like Mullins is still a good hitter against righties. He should be in center field every day against right-handers, but I and many were on board with sit him against lefties, use him as a pinch hitter, pinch runner, defensive replacement. He has been, without a doubt, the Orioles' best hitter so far this season, and he's been able to not just hold his own, but produce against left-handers as well. And now you can pencil him in as that everyday center fielder, and he's against righties in the leadoff spot. He wasn't Friday with a left-hander on the mound. I still wouldn't hit him leadoff against lefties, but against righties, he's taken over as the leadoff hitter right now. And honestly, that is okay. He's just been swinging the bat so well. And then Heston Kjerstad went deep as well. Now, the game was already over. It was 8-1 in the 8th inning, but Kjerstad demolished a 2-run shot into the right center field bleachers to make it an 8-3 game, basically the same spot he hit the home run the night before in the Orioles win over the Guardians. Pitch in the middle of the zone, just turned on it and crushed it. Really good to see Kjerstad swinging it well. And unfortunately, that was pretty much it for the Orioles offense on Friday. It was just those 3 runs that they scored on the 2 long balls. And they also struck out. They struck out a season high 15 times on Friday night, even with the Orioles kind of, they've had a top 10, top 12-ish offense most of the year. We know it's been kind of a roller coaster so far through these 21 games for the Orioles offensively. But one thing that really has not been a problem this year has been strikeouts. They've been basically middle of the pack in strikeout rate for an offense. It's not something that, has been a huge issue that it's like, hey, they're just not making contact. They've been making contact, but they were dominated by a lefty again. I mean, Andrew Abbott was awesome. Tyler O'Neill came in to be your lefty masher. You cannot have him going 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts against a left-handed starter like he did on Friday night. I mean, O'Neill is now 2 for 18 with 11 strikeouts against lefties this year. He was the second best hitter in baseball against left-handed pitching, only behind Aaron Judge in 2024. That's one of the big reasons why the Orioles signed him to that 3-year contract. And he's still been a productive hitter overall because he's hit righties really well. And he's been overall one of the Orioles' better hitters so far this season. And I think it's a small sample size. He's just been so good against lefties his entire career in both St. Louis and Boston. He will hit better. But that's been, I think, the biggest part of the Orioles' struggles against lefties so far this year is that O'Neill, who's come in to be the number 3 or 4 hitter in the middle of this lineup when they face southpaws, just hasn't really done anything. The Orioles have a 58, this was coming into play on Saturday, had a 58 WRC plus as a team against lefties. That was 28th in baseball. Only 2 offenses have been worse against left-handers than the Orioles so far this year. Meanwhile, a 120 WRC plus against righties is 8th. So the top 10 offense against righties, abysmal against lefties so far. But the guys that they should be able to count on to hit lefties, Adley Rutschman, Jordan Westberg, Gunnar Henderson, Tyler O'Neill, Ramon Laureano, all haven't really been hitting lefties. All did it super well last year. Now I'm confident they'll pick it up, but it's been aggravating so far early in this season. Now, what went wrong from that Friday loss? Well, Cade Povich went wrong, and Cade Povich just could not throw a strike on Friday. And you could tell from the opening AB of this game, Povich versus Reds leadoff hitter Matt McLain, you could immediately tell that something was going to be off. And Povich did put up a 0 in the first inning. He got McLain to pop out in that at-bat, but immediately he was spraying the fastball up and away to the righties. And you start to get nervous because it's like, okay, it's one batter, it's one inning, but he's got to be able to pull that thing into the zone. It just felt like something mechanically was wrong. His arm was lagging behind his body, whatever it was, everything. It was all basically righties in the Reds lineup against the lefty Povich. He was just missing everything up and arm side against the righties. It was a 45% overall zone rate. That is not good for this start. He threw 8 sinkers, which is his least used pitch. 0 of the 8 sinkers were in the strike zone. If you throw a pitch 8 times, that's not a lot, right? That's probably your number 5 pitch. You got to be able to at least throw it in the strike zone. I don't know, once, twice. Like that was pretty indicative of what was going on the entire night or evening for Povich, who finished with a line of 3 1/3 innings, 7 runs on 6 hits, 4 strikeouts, 5 walks, and 3 homers allowed on 84 pitches for the Orioles' young left-hander. He was not good. The changeup command wasn't really good either. I mean, he didn't have command of any of his pitches, but the changeup, the new kick change, it was the best pitch he threw on Friday night. When he was looking good in spurts, it was the changeup that was helping him. They only put 2 out of the 16 he threw in play. What I would have done is, even though the changeup command wasn't perfect, I just would have spammed changeup. I would have had him throw, once we got to the second or third inning of that game. I mean, he did put up 0s in the first and second until Cincinnati got a 3 spot against him in the third. But once he started to struggle in that third inning, you got to notice that changeup's going well. And I know it's a newer pitch for him with a new grip, but at some point, if it's your one pitch that's working, just throw it. And only 16 of his 84 pitches ended up being changeups. It was his number 3 offering on the night. It was by far the best one that was working the most against those Cincinnati righties. Just have him throw it and throw it and throw it until they get on it, because obviously what he didn't work. He couldn't command anything. Guys were sitting on his fastball, and he was throwing the fastball in the middle of the zone. The Reds were sitting on it. That's what led to the 3 home runs that he allowed in this game. And he had allowed 7 innings, and he couldn't even finish, or 7 runs, and couldn't even finish 4 innings. And Povich we know this, he's given up a lot of hits so far this season in his first 3 starts, but he wasn't walking guys. He had only walked 3 batters total in his first 3 starts, and he allowed only 1 home run in his first 3 starts. So you're looking at that and you're like, okay, that's how you give up a lot of hits but avoid big damage. Well, he walked 5 and he gave up 3 homers in just 3 1/3 in this one. That's going to make things snowball, and that is exactly what happened to Povich. It was not good. I'm not as concerned with the fact that the mechanics were off early in the game. You could immediately notice it in the first inning. The concerning part is that he couldn't fix it. Even into the fourth, as he continued to struggle, it was the same mechanical issue, missing up and away to righties, that we saw in the first batter against Matt McLain. And at some point, and some of it is done by the pitching coach and some is done by the catcher, but at the end of the day, the pitcher has to make the adjustment himself. Mechanical issues happen to pitchers all the time. The fact that he threw 84 pitches and never in that time did he seemingly fix the mechanical issue that was happening early in the game that made him spray the ball, that's the concerning part, that he couldn't make that adjustment enough to at least stay in the game and keep the Orioles in the game. It just became a disaster, and the O's were playing way, way from behind and put in a bad spot in this one. And the shout out for Friday night's loss, the shout out goes to Scott Blewett, who, hey, when your starter's terrible and leaves in the fourth inning in the first game of a series, it is really important to get some length out of at least one of your relievers. And Scott Blewett did just that. He didn't help the Orioles win the game because, again, it was already 7-1 when Povich left, but he certainly helped the Orioles from a bullpen perspective. Blewett goes 2 2/3, allowing just one unearned run. Shouldn't have even scored if not for a Jorge Mateo throwing error. On 4 hits with 4 strikeouts on 1 walk, he throws 43 pitches to kind of get it to the next part of the bullpen, where Matt Bowman and Cionel Perez combined for 3 scoreless innings after that to keep it an 8-1 and then an 8-3 game. But his stuff looked good again. 24 of his 43 pitches were sliders. He got 7 whiffs on 16 swings against that pitch. And after the Orioles had claimed him off waivers from the Twins on Monday, we knew the most likely scenario was Blewett's pretty new. He's just going to be here for a couple of days. When the Orioles need to call up Brandon Young for Saturday, which they did, the most obvious move was going to be to DFA Blewett and hope that he clears waivers. And he was DFA'd. As of recording here Sunday evening, we haven't heard his fate yet. I hope he does clear waivers, and I hope he accepts his assignment to AAA to stay in the organization, because I like the stuff. And I'll shout out Cionel Perez, too, for throwing a scoreless 8th and 9th inning, his by far best outing of the year. But then he looked terrible again on Sunday, so that kind of all went out the window, and it ended up being an 8-3 loss for the O's on Friday. But they did bounce back, and they played some fun baseball on Saturday. There was a major league debut, and there was a lot of hitting from the Orioles offense to even the series. I'll tell you how it happened in Saturday's win coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. When you can start using Monarch, realize how much you're spending on food delivery. Now you can budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So after the loss on Friday, we moved to Saturday, where the Orioles played a whole lot better baseball and ended up winning the game 9-5. So I am going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 9-5 win over the Cincinnati Reds on Saturday. And the first thing you need to know is Brandon Young made his major league debut. 26-year-old right-handed starting pitcher who was kind of the number 2 pitching prospect in the Orioles system at this point, behind Chase McDermott. He was an undrafted free agent in the shortened 5-round draft in 2020. He got Tommy John surgery a couple of years ago, came back, was great in the minors last year, got to AAA, won the Orioles Minor League Pitcher of the Year award, was really good in his first 3 starts this year, 16 1/3 innings, 17 strikeouts, 2 walks. He had been great. And the Orioles needed a starter. After putting Zach Eflin on the IL, they could get away with it for a couple of weeks with all the off days, but Saturday became the day where they were running with 4 starters, and they finally needed a 5th starter. And Brandon Young had earned it, but Brandon Young was also basically the only other option with all the injuries the Orioles had sustained. So Young gets the call up to start against one of the offenses in baseball that had been struggling the most. so far this season. So it did kind of work out to put him in that spot. And he was fine. He was solid. He gave the O's a chance to win. Wasn't anything spectacular. There were goods, there were bads. It was 4+ innings for Young, 3 runs on 7 hits, 3 strikeouts, 3 walks, and a home run on 81 pitches thrown, 6 hard hit balls allowed by the rookie right-hander in his major league debut. Now, it got off to a little bit of a rocky start after he retired 2 of the first 3 hitters. 7 straight Reds at one point reached against Brandon Young. Now, you hear 7 straight hitters reaching, and you're like, that must have gotten out of hand. Well, it didn't, because Tyler O'Neill made an incredible throw to the plate to get the final out of the first inning on a base hit. And then Brandon Young showed off a really good pickoff move to get one of his outs in the second inning. So they erased 2 base runners. And that is why you allow 7 straight guys to reach in the first and second innings and only allow 3 runs total in a start, when you help yourself out and get your fielders to help you out making some outs on the bases. Now, his trademark command was a little bit off, right? He's a guy known for not walking many, and he walked 3 and 4+ innings, probably due to some nerves. I'm not going to fully judge a guy on what we see from his major league debut. And honestly, it was a really tough spot for Brandon Young. The Orioles rotation, as we know, worst rotation ERA in baseball. They have been terrible so far early this season. You combine that with all the injuries the rotation has had. They just held up Brandon Young. In a perfect world, where the Orioles, even if they didn't add better starting pitching, if they at least had all their starting pitching healthy, the O's are nowhere close at this point on thinking about calling up Brandon Young. If they need someone else, Albert Suarez, Chase McDermott, Trevor Rogers, all these guys are in the mix for being that next man up. Even Cade Povich, if they were really kind of truly healthy. Young came in as the number 10 starting pitcher coming into the season, and he was now, at least for one day, the number 5 guy on April 19th. That is how quickly the Orioles suffered that many starting pitcher injuries in both the big league rotation and the depth they had in AAA. So it was a tough spot, because the Orioles may not feel like he's fully seasoned, and I don't think they think that, but he was the best option and they needed him. And honestly, again, it was okay. He did seem a little afraid of attacking with his fastball at some points, and it is a good pitch. It's pretty average velocity, maybe a little above average at 94 for a right-handed starter, but he threw it 24 times, cutter 22 times, curveball 18 times, and changeup 17 times. That was the 4-pitch mix. He really mixed things well. The velocities were pretty normal from what we're used to seeing from Young. I just thought he could have relied on the 4-seamer more than he did. He could have thrown it more. It looked good. He commanded it okay at times. The changeup was his best pitch. It got better as the game went on. All 3 of his strikeouts and all 4 of his swings and misses he got in the start were on that changeup, which I think is Brandon Young's best pitch. And it's really going to be a weapon for him as he settles in more and gets more chances in the big leagues. But I saw enough where I would have been okay with Young getting another start. Again, it wasn't perfect. He came back out in the 5th. He walked the leadoff batter. Hyde pulled him. Young probably knew that, hey, your pitch count's getting up there. It's your debut. You're looking a little shaky. First base runner you allow, you're coming out of the game. I'm sure that was the plan. Leadoff guy gets on, and he came out, but gave the Orioles 12 outs, kept him in it, gave him a chance to win. They obviously did win the game on Saturday, but Brandon Young was optioned on Sunday, and we will get to that in a moment. But we know, unless there's an injury on the Orioles staff, he will not be making that next start in the rotation. But I thought, all said and done, solid job by Brandon Young in his debut. And the Orioles, if we're being honest, they're probably going to need him at some point later this season. So hopefully he goes down to AAA, works on some more things, and is even better when he comes back to the majors. Second thing you need to know from this Saturday win is that the Orioles started this game with a bang versus Hunter Greene. I talked about it on Friday. Hunter Greene, through 4 starts, had been quite simply the best starting pitcher in Major League Baseball this year. He had an ERA below 1 coming into this start. Each of his last 3 starts had gone at least 7 innings, and the Orioles got him out of the game after 3. Greene's final line, by far his worst start of the year so far, was 3 innings, 5 runs, 6 hits, 4 Ks, 2 walks, and 3 home runs on 77 pitches. And 2 of those home runs came against the first 2 batters. Cedric Mullins, with the Orioles down 1-0 in the bottom of the first, leads it off with a home run. Boom, we're tied at 1. And then immediately, Gunnar Henderson, boom, over the fence. It is a 2-1 game against the best pitcher in baseball statistically so far this year. It was the first time that the Orioles had gone back-to-back to start a game since Cedric and Trey Mancini did it against Keegan Thompson of the Cubs back on June 7th of 2022. Green had a .98 ERA. He had allowed 1 homer and 3 earned runs total in 27 and 2/3 innings coming in. 2 batters in, he had allowed 2 homers and 2 earned runs. It was astounding what the Orioles did to him. I mean, they jumped on him in the first and got those couple of runs. Gunnar Henderson ripped an RBI double off him in the second to tie the game at 3. They didn't let him settle in. Like sometimes, he gave up 2 home runs and he hit 2 batters in the first inning. Sometimes you could let a guy get out of that inning, which he did after 30 pitches, and kind of settle in after that. The O's didn't let him settle in. They got 1 in the second. They got 2 in the third. They were patient. He walked guys. They ran the pitch count up. They didn't chase his really good slider. I mean, Ramon Laureano got a double off his slider. That was the first hit he had allowed all year on his slider in his 5th start when Arias roped a double into the corner. It was probably the best full approach by the Orioles against a starting pitcher this year and against the guy who had been the best starter in baseball this season. I was so impressed by what we saw from the Orioles 1 through 9 against Green. It got them an early lead. It kept them in the game. It was really, really awesome to see. And then Ramon Laureano had the game of his life. He delivered the crushing blow to Hunter Green, a 2-run homer in the third that put the Orioles up 5-3 at the time, and Green did not even come back out for the 4th inning. And then Laureano added a solo shot in the 7th, which was a huge insurance run, made it a 5-4 to a 6-4 game in the bottom of the 7th inning. A 2-homer game for Ramon Laureano almost was 3. In the 8th inning, he hit a fly out 390 feet to dead center field that was caught just in front of the warning track. Off the bat, I thought he had a 3-homer game. Ramon Laureano, who wasn't hitting at all early in the year, 5th 2-homer game of Laureano's career, his first since June 30th of 2022. And also, he made a great leaping catch on a line drive in left field for the final out of the game to secure the win. I mean, by far the best day in an Orioles uniform for Ramon Laureano after signing with that 1-year deal this offseason. Really the unfortunate part, I mean, Laureano was great with the 2 homers. He was the first Oriole to hit 2 home runs coming off the bench in a game since Trey Mancini did it in June of 2021. No, excuse me, in June of 2017 when Mancini hit the game-tying homer in the 9th and the walk-off homer in the 11th in a game against the Pirates during his rookie season. That was the last Oriole to do it. And that's the unfortunate part, is that Laureano came off the bench to do this, not as a pinch hitter, but because Heston Kjerstad had to leave this game. I mentioned Hunter Green hitting 2 batters in the bottom of the 1st inning. One of them was Kjerstad, who took a 99.5 mile per hour fastball right off his elbow, stayed in the game for another inning, and then left what the Orioles called a right elbow contusion. Now, luckily, X-rays were negative. Contusion generally means just you got a big giant bruise after getting hit by a 100 mile per hour pitch. Kjerstad did not play in the Sunday game. The Orioles had the off day Monday. We didn't hear anything bad, so hopefully he's good to go back in the lineup Tuesday at Nats Park because he's been swinging it well. But that was kind of the downside of Laureano being so good. It's because Kjerstad did have to leave the game. But 4th thing you need to know from this Orioles win is that overall the O's were just crushing the baseball on Saturday. I mean, Jordan Westburg has to feel better than anyone. He went back-to-back with Laureano in the 7th with another solo shot to make it 7-4. That for Westburg broke an 0 for 30 stretch that he was in. He hit a solo homer to left field to end that. And it's been a weird season for Westburg. You know, he's been having off days a lot. He's been DHing a lot. The Orioles have been saying there's been some soreness in his upper body. Remember, he had that back issue that kept him out for a few weeks in spring training, but was good for opening day. Now it's something's bothering him again. We're not sure if it's the same back issue, but clearly not only is it bothering him, I mean, it's impacting what he was doing at the plate. The 0 for 30 was clearly impacted by the issue that he is having. So hopefully he's feeling better, and he's DHing a lot, which makes me think something's going on when he's not playing the field. But hopefully this is the sign that he's moving back in the right direction. But overall, the Orioles had 17 hard hit balls in this game in 8 innings. Gunnar, O'Hearn, Laureano, and Westburg all had 3. 17 hard hit balls ties a season high. They also had 17 in the 9-1 win over the Guardians back on Wednesday. And they did have 17 or more hard hit balls 17 times last year. So this is not a crazy number, but only 4 of those 17 instances came after the All-Star break last season when the Orioles offense really struggled in the second half. They just didn't hit the ball hard that much. So really good to see them do it twice in a week. 22 hard hit balls was the record from last year. 17 so far the record from this year. Let's see if they can beat it. And they did it a lot of ways. 5 home runs, second most of the season. Also, they drew 7 walks. That was the most walks the Orioles had drawn in a game this year. The approach was amazing. They knocked Green out of the game even better than opening day with the 6 homers. This, to me, was the best offensive performance from the Orioles this season. They kind of put it all together. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 9-5 win over the Reds Saturday is that the bullpen got used a lot, but they were able to close out the win. As I mentioned, Brandon Young was pulled after a leadoff walk in the 5th. And again, you had the off day Monday. The bullpen was fairly rested and available. Young was looking shaky. You got to win the game. I was fine with the move. But then the Orioles bullpen was just not as crisp as it's been this year. Brian Baker, who's been amazing, walked 2 batters in the 5th inning coming in for Young for the first time this season, but he did strand the bases loaded, kept the Orioles in the lead. Keegan Aiken allowed 2 hits and a run in the 6th, but Seranthony Dominguez, and really it was turned by Ramon Laureano, got a huge double play to get out of a jam to keep it at a 5-4 lead. Gregory Soto then walked 2 in the 7th, the second time he's done that, but he did strand the bases loaded. And Soto had gone 6 straight appearances without a walk until Saturday when he came in and walked 2. And then Matt Bowman, the Orioles were getting ready to bring Felix into the game. They were up 7-4 in the bottom of the 8th. And then the Orioles, they added 2 more runs, the bottom of the 8th off of Carson Spires to make it a 9-4 game. And it was like, all right, sit down, Felix. Matt Bowman's getting up. He's going to finish off this 5-run lead. He's been great. And then Matt Bowman was just terrible for the first time this season, allowed his first walk and his first home run of the year. He did not record an out in the 9th inning, and that made Felix still come in. Now, luckily, that might have been the best Felix has looked. He comes in and goes 1-2-3 and actually does record the save in the 9-5 win. So that was the good sign. Now, the bullpen got it done. They did issue a lot of walks, and they did have to use a season-high 7 of the 8 relievers they had on the roster for Saturday. So that was a little bit concerning, but they did it all to get the victory and even the series at 1. And Brandon Hyde said it. He said, hey, what's going to help us win on Sunday is we can get some length from Charlie Morton, because the bullpen did get taxed to win this Saturday game. Unfortunately, they didn't get length. They got what seems impossible was somehow the worst Charlie Morton start of the year. A complete disaster on Sunday. I'll recap it to finish off the show coming up next. So Friday wasn't great. Saturday was good. Sunday was the worst it's been this year. And now the Orioles lost a game 24-2. Let's put it a little bit into perspective. Yes, any loss by that margin or anything close to that margin is embarrassing. Note that the Orioles used a position player in the 8th and 9th innings when the Reds scored 9 more runs. So was it an embarrassing 15-2 loss when they started using position players on the mound? Yes, it was. That's kind of how it got to 24. Luckily, it did not get to 30 once again, but it was a 24-2 loss. Here's the part that's a little bit embarrassing. The height of the rebuild, Mike Elias Orioles, never gave up 24 runs. They gave up 23 against the Astros on August 10th of 2019. They gave up 22 against Toronto on September 12th of 2021. But they never gave up 24. 24 runs, tied for the 5th most ever allowed by the Orioles. Last time they allowed 24 or more runs was, of course, the 30-run game in 2007 against the Rangers. The other times they had done it, well, 2 of those times were done by the St. Louis Browns. So we're not counting those. Really, the true Orioles themselves had allowed 24 or more runs just 3 times before this. The 30-run game against the Rangers in 2007. April 19th, 1996, against the Texas Rangers. 96 team, though, ended up being pretty good. And the 1978 Orioles allowed 24 against the Toronto Blue Jays. So not great that this happened. Not great, but let's talk about it for a little bit and then get out of here. What went right on Sunday? Not much, but Adley Rutschman did go deep. 4th home run of the season, his first since last Saturday. He's hitting just 208 with a 689 OPS, but he did add a single in this one, just his second multi-hit game of the year. The other was when he had 3 hits on opening day in Toronto, but him mashing a home run was not really breaking a slump of bad approach, but it was more showing how good his contact has really been this year. Assistant hitting coach Tommy Joseph talked with the media before Sunday's game, and he got asked a couple of times about Adley Rutschman and his struggles so far, again at OPS under 700. And Joseph talked about it. Rutschman's having good ABs. He's making good contact. He's being patient. He's just getting really unlucky. And although Rutschman is struggling, not as badly as he was struggling in the second half last year, but struggling with similar statistics that we saw down the stretch in 2024, it is not even close to the same thing. Last year down the stretch, Adley was popping everything up, not squaring the ball up, chasing balls out of the zone. He was not walking. He was striking out. It was a full disaster. This year, the process has been great. The results just unlucky. It's a 208 batting average, but a 274 expected batting average. That is with how well he's hit the ball. It's a 390 slugging percentage, but a 519 expected slugging percentage with how well he's been hitting the ball. And remember on my episode last week when I talked about, or a couple weeks ago when I talked about hitting stats and how BABIP, batting average on balls in play, league average is about 270, 280 on balls in play. Anything well below it, you're getting super unlucky. Anything well above it, you're getting super lucky. Adley Rutschman is running a 196 BABIP. That is like one of the 15 worst in all of baseball. That is incredibly unlucky that he is getting. You look at the expected stats, you look at the contact rates, you look at the BABIP, 40% squared up rate. That's like how are you hitting the ball in the perfect spot of the bat. He's third in baseball in squared up rate. Only Luis Arraez and Geraldo Perdomo have a higher squared up rate than Adley Rutschman this year. And those are two guys who need that because they have no power in their game. That's how they just kind of hit singles everywhere. Adley Rutschman, as he showed with his fourth homer, has some pop in his bat. His strikeout rate is low. His walk rate is high. His chase rate is elite. It's under 20%. It's in the top 10 percentile of Major League Baseball. This is nothing like the hitter we saw in the second half last year. He's going to start producing very soon. And honestly, it may have started with that game on Sunday. Kind of hidden in a 24-2 loss was this is probably what gets Adley going because everything under the hood looks great. Just if you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, look at the Baseball Savant page for Adley Rutschman right now. That's a lot of red. Like things are looking good for him right now. Only a matter of time, and hopefully Sunday kind of kicked things off. Now, what went wrong on Sunday? A lot of things. Pitching, but specifically Charlie Morton. He hit rock bottom on Sunday. It had not been good through his first four starts. He had come in with an 8+ ERA. You thought it can't really get worse. It got worse. It somehow got worse. I don't really know how it got worse, but it got worse. 2 1/3 innings, 7 runs, 7 hits, 2 Ks, 4 walks, and a homer on 68 pitches for Morton. He now has a 10.89 ERA in 5 starts with the Orioles. Couple of his starts this year, it's been, strikeout stuff looks good, just not commanding it super well. Other starts, it's been, the command's been a little off, but, his stuff is getting him out of jams, blah, blah, blah. This was neither thing. This was just bad. Everything was bad. I'm surprised he even recorded the 7 outs that he did in this start. It was a disaster. He had one start like this last year with the Braves, 2 2/3 innings, 8 earned runs against the Brewers on August 8th. But that was because he allowed 4 homers. He only walked 1 batter in that one. This was different. This was 4 walks and 1 homer. Other than that start last year, what we saw Sunday statistically was the worst start of Charlie Morton's career since 2015. And remember, Morton kind of went that overhaul in 2017 when he joined Mike Elias and the Astros and became a completely different pitcher. So really Morton from 08 to 2016 is one pitcher, and then 2017 until now is another pitcher. So the updated version of Charlie Morton, pretty much the worst start since then. This is the only time in his career he has allowed 4 or more earned runs in 5 consecutive starts. The only time he was ever worse overall in a 5-start stretch was in April of 2010 when he had a 12.57 ERA in 5 starts. That was the worst season of his major league career, was in 2010, well before he underwent the overhaul. It's just a disaster. And the biggest issue is the command. He's got none of it. And I've talked about this a lot where it's like 41-year-old pitcher, how's he going to go the wrong way? Well, he loses all velocity, his stuff's gone, and everything's hittable in the middle of the zone. Morton's kind of going the other way where he's losing all command. Generally, pitchers who are still in the big leagues in their late 30s and 40s because the command is good. Morton's lost it all. 12 walks in his last 3 starts. His curveball is still nasty. The stuff numbers are there. The swing and miss is there. But his curveball was in the strike zone only 29% of the time. It was his number 1 most used pitch on Sunday with a 29% zone rate. That is abysmal. Guys can just take it. They can say, here comes the curveball. I know it's nasty, but he can't throw it for a strike right now. So I'm just not going to swing because it's mostly going to be a ball. And if he gets it in for a strike, fine. He won't do it again, and I'll be fine. So the nastiness of the curveball, even though it's still there, it doesn't matter because he can't throw it for a strike. 44.2% overall zone rate on all of his pitches, worst of his career, down 4% from last year. 38% zone rate on his curveball, worst since 2016 before the overhaul. So the question is really, is he cooked? We're going to get into this probably more on tomorrow's episode, but it's possible. I mean, 5 starts is still too small of a sample size for a guy who's been so good, so durable for so long. His velo is down a tick, maybe. It's basically the same as last year. His stuff is down a tick, maybe, but it's most of the same as last year. And that's last year when he made 40 starts with a very respectable 4.19 ERA for the Braves. Like, he was a solid 4 or 5 starter all year, stayed healthy for Atlanta. Now it's a disaster. And I think it's just the command. It's gone. The issue is you can't replace him at this point. Brandon Young was optioned on Sunday after the start Saturday, and Cade Povich was called up to join the Oriole bullpen because the O's, they needed a long man in that pen for Sunday, and did they? Povich gave him 3 innings or so out of the bullpen, and I was fine with that Young move, but because he was optioned, that means Brandon Young can't return for at least 15 days to the majors unless he is replacing a player going on the injured list. Kyle Gibson threw 78 pitches in another start, this one in Aberdeen on Sunday, just so he could be closer to the bigs because AAA Norfolk is out in Omaha, so that's why Young was with the Ironbirds this week, and that's why Gibson was also in Aberdeen with the Ironbirds. And if the O's think that went fine, he's built up to pitch Friday in Detroit. So it'll be Kramer Tuesday, Sugano Wednesday, Povich Thursday, and then it could be Kyle Gibson coming up in Detroit Friday, but then you would still need Charlie Morton to start Saturday in Detroit. It would not be enough time for Kramer to turn around and start again. And I wish there was another option in AAA right now, but there's not. Albert Suarez, Chase McDermott, Trevor Rogers, Zach Eflin, Grayson Rodriguez, they're all hurt. So right now, I mean, we're looking at least one more Charlie Morton start Saturday, and then the next scheduled one would be May 2nd at home against the Royals. Hopefully Zach Eflin is back off the injured list by then. That's really the next time you can move on from Morton. I would like to do it at this point, at least move him to the bullpen because it's been a disaster. But I'm just waiting for another option to get healthy or emerge, and so far, hasn't happened. So until Eflin comes off the IL, they're probably just going to have to throw Charlie Morton back out there. And as I said earlier this week, he's just going to have to be better. And somehow, and I've been talking about this, each start got a little bit better from the first to the fourth one. This one fell off a cliff and was extremely worse. And he did look cooked. I would say the first 4 starts were not good, but you could tell from like the stuff and how he was looking, it was a command issue, but he didn't look cooked. He looked like a 41-year-old who was cooked on Sunday. I'm not going to say that means he is cooked, but it's becoming more of a possibility for me now. And I would like to remove him from the rotation. But as I said, because of injuries and because of not bringing in enough high-level pitching this offseason, there's not another option. At least for one more go-around, he's going to have to start in Detroit this Saturday unless he's injured. So we'll see how that goes. And then hopefully Zach Eflin can come back to this rotation right after that. And the shout out for Sunday, well, the shout out goes to Jorge Mateo and Gary Sanchez because they both pitched. The Orioles brought in position players to pitch in the 8th inning. Jorge Mateo was just lobbing it in there. He gave up 5 runs. Gary Sanchez gave up 4, but he was at least trying. He was throwing fastballs at 85. He was throwing legitimate curveballs. Austin Wynns also took him deep. Here is Sunday in a nutshell. We love Austin Wynns. Great backup catcher, great number 3 catcher, good defender, had some pop in his bat. Austin Wynns was sometimes a fun player to watch. He wasn't very good, but during the rebuild years, it was nice to have an Austin Wynns around. Austin Wynns went 6 for 7 against the Orioles on Sunday. That's about the rest I have to say about that series loss. Orioles are now 9-12, off day Monday, head to DC against the Nats on Tuesday. But I will still have an episode for you on Tuesday, despite no game tonight. Think we're going to open up the mailbag once again. So please, you can leave your mailbag questions right here in the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel on this video, or as always, you can email me lockedonorioles@gmail.com with those mailbag questions. We'll certainly talk about Charlie Morton, but talk about a lot more coming up on tomorrow's mailbag episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.